I think that the international community really is looking for some kind of vehicle to ensure that, A, we prevent a crisis really getting out of hand to the extent that innocent people are suffering or indeed are killed, and secondly, that once the situation gets to that stage, that there is a mechanism that we can rely on to try to intervene, to try to stop these atrocities in their tracks. I think that if we didn't have the responsibility to protect rule at the United Nations, the world would seem to be really lacking and being derelict in their duty to their fellow human beings.
I think we should be first investing in trying to prevent crises and redressing the way in which all of our resources and attention tends to be put towards response. Given that in most of the crises we look at that involve the 4 acts associated with the responsibility to protect, there are risk factors that make themselves known that have to do either with the presence of instability or systematic discrimination among certain groups, or even mobilization towards the perpetration of these crimes. So we really need to act preventively. In terms of how we respond, we have to respond collectively, and what I mean by that is in a coordinated way. I think Syria shows many things, but perhaps the most serious thing it shows is how a lack of coordination and a division among parts of the international community has allowed so many lives to be lost. And it will only be through a coming together of sides that were previously apart, and I'm thinking here mostly of regional players, that we will get a political solution to the crisis.
Where there are gross abuses of human rights, where there are war crimes, crimes against humanity, we should be, the British government should be taking these issues up in the United Nations through the Security Council to try and get the Security Council collectively to take a view on these issues. Non-intervention, it also has consequences, and that sometimes situations deteriorate very badly, as we see in Syria today, where the international community has failed to do what was necessary to stop this process. The United Nations is a product of its member states, and unfortunately we don't yet have strong enough international institutions in the world. And the final point I would make is that intervention, if it happens and it's a military intervention, you have to think about the long-term consequences of building and strengthening the institutions of the state afterwards.
Well, I think we have to be realistic. Some areas of conflict and dispute, like Crimea and the Ukraine, like the South and East China Seas, are not going to be easily manageable by the UN and not easy to deal with in the UN Security Council. Why? Because a permanent member is involved, and that permanent member will veto any resolution which has any teeth in it. So there are areas like those I've mentioned and Syria where it is very difficult for the UN to function fully. Of course, its humanitarian functions in Syria are absolutely crucial, but in terms of peace and security, it has failed. Failed because of the deadlock between the permanent members. But this, fortunately, so far, does not seem to have extended to the whole world as it did in the Cold War, when you could guarantee pretty well that any conflict anywhere in the world would elude the United Nations, because one or other of the permanent members would think that one of their protégés was involved and they would have vetoed it. That's not the case now. So although we have these quasi-Cold War situations in Ukraine and East China Seas, we don't have that situation in, for example, Africa. So African peacekeeping still seems to be more or less free from that kind of paralysis and deadlock, and long may that stay so, because there are, alas, all too many problems in Africa, in Somalia, in South Sudan, in Mali, in the Central African Republic. And there it seems that for the moment the UN is operating as it ought to operate. It's authorizing peacekeeping, it's intervening in various ways to support human rights observance and so on. And that's really important to keep that, because of course back in the bad old days of the Cold War, that there was really nowhere in the world that the UN could function in a fully effective manner.
I think that the British public could be asking, how are our resources being used for prevention? Are we paying enough attention to the task of prevention? How are we responding to the risk factors of atrocity crimes, which we know from analyzing past cases what they are. So to ask their authorities what actions are being taken and try to press them towards redressing that imbalance between crisis response and prevention.